Dan and Amy. Well, there are many prognosticators and pundits and professors predicting the political demise of President Trump, that he is in a very bad place politically, that he has very little chance of winning re-election, that the odds makers, the betting markets are all trending Biden. Well, one academic is not. He is Helmut Norpoth. He is a professor of political science at Stony Brook University. He's best known for developing what's called the primary model, which the primary model makes assessments on electoral outcomes, particularly for the president. His primary model gives President Donald Trump a 91% chance of winning re-election on November 3rd. 91% chance.
Those are some good odds.
Specifically, Trump gets 362 electoral votes to Biden's 176 in Professor Norpoth's model. Now, it is worth noting that 91%, that's about his success rate, his win percentage since 1912. I think he's predicted 30 of the 32 presidential victors since 1912 based on his modeling. Pretty accurate. So let's understand the model to understand how much faith we should place in it. Professor Helmut Norpoth, Professor Poli-Sci at Stony Brook U, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm sure you're not popular in certain sets, but we certainly are interested in the methodology that you've used to be so accurate when it comes to predicting presidential outcomes, including your projection for Trump-Biden in November. So explain.
You're right. I mean, I feel a little bit like a lone wolf was my prediction. But of course, that was the same thing in 4 years ago when just about the same situation prevailed. Very few people gave Donald Trump a chance, and I was predicting that he would win with a chance of about 87% about this time or earlier. But as you mentioned, this is a model. And the devil is in the primaries. The primaries, testing presidential candidates, and especially the early ones, New Hampshire in particular, the first one. And as a lot of people may have forgotten, Joe Biden came in fifth in that primary in single digits. Donald Trump got about 85%, and would repeat that in several other primaries after that. Now, Biden did better in the state of South Carolina with the help of African Americans. That's true, but just on balance, I think you could say that Donald Trump clearly has the stronger performance in the primaries, and if you combine that with being a first-term president running for re-election and having essentially no major opposition, a candidate like that has never lost.
Yeah, but President Trump really didn't have much competition as opposed to Biden, who had, a number of people who were vying for the spot.
That's a feature.
So
that's a feature, not a bug, is what the professor's saying.
But that's true. But if you compare that to some presidents who did have opposition, it's not a sure thing that a president doesn't have opposition. If you take, for example, Bush the Elder in '92, he had opposition in New Hampshire from Pat Buchanan. It took about close to 40%. And that was a very bad sign for Bush, who lost in the end. Carter in 1980, very similar situation. It isn't necessarily true that every sitting president goes through the season unopposed. And yes, Biden had a lot of opposition, but to come in that low is very unusual. I don't know of any candidate who has finished that low in New Hampshire who sort of made it in the end.
So explain the using primary results as the basis to make these predictions, because that's sort of interesting. I mean, some might say, well, primary results because they're so anomalous. Sometimes there's sometimes there's limited competition, sometimes there's significant competition, as you were just describing. Sometimes there's no competition on one side and a lot of competition on the other. And so with all those variables, why don't we just look at this and say, well, it's interesting how accurate Professor Norpoth has been, but I mean, you can flip a coin. 30 times, and you could potentially you could have heads come up 28 times. So it's just he's just throwing darts at a board here.
You know what the chance of that is? It's probably 1 in a trillion.
Okay.
you don't get 20 out of 30 by chancellor. Let me just say one thing about the competition in primary. New Hampshire is always competitive. You always have competition, even in the party of the president. And there was a guy, Bill Weld, who
right.
is a pretty big name. Was a governor of Massachusetts, and he ran in 2016 on the Libertarian line as a VP. So he wasn't nobody. And for him to only get about like 10%, and Trump ending up with 85 is a big deal. And if you look at sitting presidents doing how they do in New Hampshire, Trump is really above a lot of other sitting presidents like Obama, like Bush, like Clinton, and et cetera. So he did something more than just normal sitting presidents do. And Biden, on the other hand, did something abnormally bad in that state.
So is this a proxy for the level of base intensity, the level of party support for a presidential candidate? Is that what this is a proxy for?
Well, it's part of it, but you see, New Hampshire is a very interesting case, and that's why I think New Hampshire is so telling. New Hampshire, for all practical purposes, is an open primary. You don't have to be a Republican to vote in the Republican primary in New Hampshire. Independents can always vote in it. They're about half of the electorate. Plus, if you are, let's say, a Democrat and you had interest in voting in the Republican primary, you could change on election day. So, and the turnout is extremely high. It's one of the highest in primaries, maybe even the highest, on a par with the general election. The only drawback, let's say, New Hampshire is a pretty homogeneous white state. It doesn't have very few Black Americans, and therefore I've for quite a while now added South Carolina as sort of to balance that lag, especially for Democrats. You saw it with Hillary Clinton in 2016. You saw it with Obama in 2008, and Clinton already earlier in 92. So with that sort of amendment, I think you get a pretty good idea from primaries early on about how strong a candidate is, and that kind of a strength, which goes beyond the base. I think. This is not just the pure partisan base that you would get in let's say, a closed primary, like I think Chicago probably has a closed primary. I would think.
Yes.
New York has one, and quite a few states have that. So I would say, it has some information beyond just the base.
It's interesting, and so I don't know where I got 30 of 32, but I counted in my head. It's 25 of 27. You've been right since 1912.
27. Yeah, I'm going to say that. I wasn't going to take credit for 30 yet.
Yeah. I'm right. So I'm making my own model, my own projections about your accuracy. So the two that you got wrong, explain those.
Oh well, the most recent one was 2000, and I think we all remember that in that election all came down to one state, Florida, and sort of the oddities of the vote count and the ballots that they had, and
didn't anticipate the butterfly ballot.
That's the butterfly ballot,
the
in
hanging
particular.
chads.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you predicted Al Gore back then?
I predicted Al Gore, yes, and I predicted Kennedy in 1960, and you're from Chicago, right?
Yes.
You're from Illinois.
How could you not factor in Richie Daley?
There's some rumors about what happened during that election in your state and Texas. So maybe, but I don't want to push that point too much.
But
these are the two.
But when you go, you're right. Hanging chads and the Daily Machine notwithstanding, do you glean anything from those incorrect predictions about the model or some variable that needs to be considered?
No, I don't. I could easily see that 2000 could have gone to Gore. It hung in the balance. For weeks, and then could have gone And in 1960, maybe a little bit less likely, but in those days, I mean, we didn't have these kind of challenges and recounts, et cetera. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, yeah, I mean, I can live with one or two out of 27.
Sure,
I
to
mean,
show you're
I don't
human.
wanna, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
would
right.
be suspicious
Yeah,
if I had everything right, and people say, "Oh, he's cooking the books."
right. Yeah, you're on performance-enhancing drugs or something.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah,
so what about so on this primary model? It's all based on those early states, or do you go back and
yeah.
you say, I'm looking state by state, so Trump's going to win Wisconsin again based on the respective primary performances. He's going to win Michigan again. It's just based
No,
on the early states.
no. I don't do my electoral vote prediction sort of state by state. It's a national number.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of tracking that number for elections since 1912. So it's predicting what the total number will be. And I was glad to learn from somebody who figured out that in fact that the number I predict is actually a real number. You could get that number from various states. I don't do it this way. And of course it's a very tall order. I mean it means he would add quite a few states to what he did 4 years ago. That might be a little unlikely. So I mean that's sort of pushing a little bit, but definitely it's going to be above 270, and I think the chance is very high that this will happen.
Wow, you might be President Trump's favorite
New
academic
best
when
friend.
he learns of this prediction, if he hasn't already. Are you going to make like a Julian Simon, Paul Ehrlich type bet with the rest of your colleagues? You should. I mean, it seems like you would have every reason to be confident.
I get challenged every day. If somebody who I don't know challenged me to a $10,000 bet, he said, "Put the money in escrow to make sure. I mean, we'll pay it out."
Uh-huh.
And yeah, people nag me all the time about that. I have a few bets running, and there's this betting site Predicted, which is legal in this country, limited amounts of money. So I went in there and bought quite a few shares in Trump. So
All right.
yeah.
Very good. He is Helmut Norpoth. He's a professor of political science at Stony Brook University. His primary model predicted 25 of the last 27 presidential victors, and he predicts 91% confidence that Trump wins re-election on November 3rd. Interesting stuff. Professor Norpoth, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Thanks. And he
Anytime.
joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.